respect to their ancestors, past, present, and future, starting with the Lenape people, including but not limited to the Merrick, Canarsie, Rockaway, Mentinecock, Munsee Lenape, and Six Nations, and acknowledge that this city and nation were founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, cultures, and stories. In addition, the foundation of this city and many of its original buildings were built and funded by the sale of enslaved people of African descent. We acknowledge this. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Liz. And now I'm going to introduce our panel. I think I'm going to introduce our panel now. Okay. The name of this is My Journey, and that's because what's happening here is everyone is going to be telling how they got started and what happens here. We're listening, our guests are Grady Barker, Antje Ellermann, Alejandro Fajardo, Joshua Marsh, Twi McCallum, and Mitchell Travers. Grady Barker is the owner of Paper Mache Donkey Design and Fabrication Studio in Brooklyn. His mission is to bridge the creative gap between design and fabrication, theater, and the art object, innovative ideas and artisanal craft. With an MFA in sculpture and years of associate theatrical design experience, Grady leads a talented team of artists to support an ever-expanding community of creative collaborators. Antje Ellermann has created sets for theater, opera, industrials, and TV. She honed her skills as an associate in New York and then spent many years designing productions, primarily of new and contemporary work for theaters across the US. More recently, she has shifted happily into the busy world of TV and film. Alejandro Fajardo is a Colombian artist based in New York City. He works primarily as a lighting designer for theater, dance, and live events. More recently, he has worked as production designer for a variety of theatrical and immersive experiences. Joshua Marsh has worked internationally as a costume designer for TV and film. With theatrical design roots, he began designing costumes in his teens before studying costume design and technology at the University of Evansville. Most recently, his work can be seen on Amazon Prime's The Wilds, as well as the upcoming We Crashed for Apple TV Plus and A24's When You Finish Saving the World, written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg. Twi McCallum is a sound designer. Her proudest accomplishment is being the first woman of color sound designer on Broadway. She has just joined the Skywalker sound team doing sound effects and dialogue editing for an array of Marvel, Disney, and Pixar projects. She is a former student of Howard University and a graduate of the Yale School of Drama's one-year sound program. Mitchell Travers worked on Bo Burnham's indie hit 8th Grade, earned him a spot on Variety's Artisan's Impact Report. He transformed Emma Thompson into a chic pantsuit-sporting late-night TV host in Mindy Kaling's Late Night. His work on Lorene Scafaria's hit film Hustlers earned him a nomination for the Costume Designers Guild Awards. Mitchell has collaborated with John M. Chu on Apple TV's Home Before Dark, as well as In the Heights. Most recently, his work can be seen in the transformation of Jessica Chastain in The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Shotgun Wedding starring Jennifer Lopez, and the Shakespearean Rosaline starring Caitlin Dever. Before beginning his own work, Mitchell spent 10 years as an associate costume designer on projects including Ocean's 8 and the Meyerowitz Stories, and assistant costume designer on Saturday Night Live, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Bourne Legacy, Joy, The Blacklist, and 30 Rock. Mitchell was educated at the University of Connecticut, receiving dual BFA degrees in costume design and puppetry. Now I'm going to turn it over to Grady to tell us a little bit about his journey. Grady, you're muted. Yeah, you're having trouble unmuting? Okay, wait a second. We'll take care of that.
Hey guys, while Ray is unmuting him, I just want to remind everybody that as we go through, I see Grady's unmuted. As we go through the program, please put questions in the chat. I will be reviewing them. Try to tell me who to direct your question to, and then at the end, we will address them. Thank you. This is Elizabeth.
Hi, folks. My name's Grady Barker. I'm the owner of a design and fabrication studio. It's kind of like a prop shop. It's a little bit more than a prop shop, but for all intents and purposes, let's call it a prop shop. It's called Paper Mache Monkey, and it's in Brooklyn in Greenpoint. It's been open for 11 years, and I've been owning that for that amount of time. I'm actually a trained sculptor. I didn't come from a theater background at all. So I just kind of wandered here, to be honest with you. And it was kind of, I think at the heart of everything, I have a MFA in sculpture from San Francisco Art Institute. And it has always been my aim to and I was always knowing that I wanted to do art in some way. I didn't know how. I knew that I create very well in small collaborative groups where we can kind of come together and solve a thing. And I didn't know what that thing was, and it didn't really matter to me. It was kind of like, I want to work in a small group where every day we have problems to solve, and we solve them together. You know, I'm not like a gallery artist where although I did that, I tried that, where you kind of sit alone in a studio and come up with brilliant things based on, you know, your inner thoughts. It always helped me to be in a group. And so I kind of knew that about myself. And I also knew that I wanted to figure out a way that I could have a sustainable career doing that in the arts. I didn't know how it was going to work, but like that was the goal. It's been the goal since, you know, high school. And so when I graduated with my sculpture degree, I moved to New York, and a friend of a friend hooked me up with a job on the 20-person team that does all the famous Christmas windows for Saks Fifth Avenue and Macy's and Lord & Taylor and all that kind of stuff. And I was, because I had welding experience, they put me in the animation department. And I spent the next 4 years of my life making elves dance. Literally, it was a full-time job with benefits. And, you know, in the height of July, when it's like boiling hot in New York City, we had like glitter all over ourselves, and it was disgusting. But it was like that was my first job, and it was perfect because it was a full-time job. We worked from probably March until Thanksgiving every year, and then in the off period, you could kind of do your own art. It was kind of like a functional studio that we had downtime that I could show in galleries and kind of have the creative time for myself. And so I got to kind of like hone my skills, like my craft, and knowing how to build things correctly and knowing all the technical things by working at this company. But then it also kind of allowed me the time to kind of do my conceptual stuff and do my own work and that kind of stuff. So it was really great. And that was a great beginning job for me in New York City. It's called Space Design. It's a perfect first job for a lot of people if you are technically interested, you know. The downside of that is it ruins the holidays for you, right? Because you've been working on Christmas year round, and when it gets to the holidays, you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore. You know, so at a certain point, you're kind of like, I need to step away. And while I was doing this, so I was doing sculpture and showing in galleries, and that whole system is something where you front the money, you make a sculpture, you show it, and pray that somebody's going to buy it, right? And more often than not, they don't. And so you have this thing, and you're like, in a New York apartment, you can only have so many things. And so you're like, what do I do with this? I paid a whole bunch of money. Nobody wants it. And it was hard, like it was a money suck, really. And I was also working or friends with a lot of the theater community. It was just kind of a tangential friendship with a lot of people, a lot of directors. And at some point, one of the directors said, hey, I have $3,000. Will you design a set for me? And I was like, wait, you're going to pay me? Like, that's wonderful. I'll do a sculpture for you and you're going to pay me at the start. I'll do that. And not, so suddenly it was kind of like, I like this business model, you're paying me to do work. And at a certain point I could do it. It was interesting. It was like making giant sculptures on the stage, which I loved. And at that point I was kind of like, you know what, maybe I should take the plunge into theater. And I was like, where can I just get like a jump start, super fast jump start to kind of meet the people who I want to meet, get the lingo, get the technical background that I need and all the kind of stuff. And I applied to Williamstown Theater Festival for the summer. And I went there and it's an intense summer, like everybody knows, but you do meet all the people you need to meet, right? All the Broadway people, all the connections, all the people who are around you are the new upcoming wave of New York theater workers, and they're working alongside the people who are currently the best on Broadway. And so it's just like a hotbed where you just kind of make connects. And I wound up meeting Danielle Worley, who is a set designer. It was her first show with Tommy Kail of In the Heights and Hamilton. And I was the associate designer on that. I had never done anything in theater. It was like my second show. It was July. And I was working with like literally the best, right? And Danielle and I hit it off. And when I came back from Williamstown that summer, she hired me as her associate and took me under her wing. And I did the next like 15 shows with her, including and she's an interesting designer because she's very hands-on. She's a painter by trade, whereas I was a sculptor. And so our kind of hands-on making kind of offset each other or complemented each other very well. And we started we did many shows and they were kind of sustainable. We were investigating sustainable design and recycled sets and all of this kind of stuff. It was kind of the new wave of that in like 2008. And we did a workshop at the Public of a show called Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, which was all handmade, kind of high art, low art, just sculptures on stage, just a whole bunch of mess of sculptures. And Danielle and I did it all, because the workshop, you don't really have a crew, you just do it yourself. Then that kind of got picked up and moved to the main stage at the Public, where we kind of still did it all ourselves. And then that went to Broadway. And the Broadway producers said, oh my gosh, who's going to make all this stuff? You can't, it was chocked full of set dressing that was just handmade stuff. And they didn't know how to do it. And the only real person who knew how to do it was Danielle and me. Danielle obviously needed to be at the theater to be the head designer in the room. So that the producers kind of looked at me and said, we're gonna set you up with a shop in Dumbo in Brooklyn, hire a team and make this happen. And they didn't pay me very much, but I was very excited. And I hired and I brought in my very good friend who wound up being my original business partner for Paper Mache Monkey, and we made that show happen. It was a lot. It was kind of like we were working 16-hour days and sleeping under our desks when we needed to. It was just it was like 2 months of kind of nuts. It wound up and then upon opening, when they were making the playbill, they said, what's the name of your company? And we were like, Paper Mache Monkey. And that show wound up getting a nomination for a Tony for the best set design of a play that year. And which was, oh my gosh, great. And the producers kind of looked at us and said, well, that worked well, didn't it? Here are 4 more Broadway shows. And so our company was kind of off and running with that kind of initial kind of sprint. Within the next year with Danielle, again, we did Peter and the Starcatcher, which is kind of the same. Peter and the Starcatcher worked at New York Theater Workshop off Broadway. And early on, it was Disney was kind of a feeler out producer. They wanted to see if whether it was something that they wanted to produce. Tom Schumacher gave us our shop. So we moved out of the Dumbo shop and we moved into the Mary Poppins Theater, the New Amsterdam, just upstairs into a warehouse that Disney just kind of gave it to us and said, make the set here. And we'll give you, the whole goal of it was that it was going to be 100% recycled, reclaimed sets. And we were trying to figure out usually to recycle, it's morally good, but in practice, it's a little bit, it's more expensive, right? Because you have to process the materials, you have to, it's harder to find. It's kind of like, it takes a lot of labor. And so it was kind of our business model to try to figure out if we could offset the cost of the rise in labor to process the materials with such low material costs that everything was found, everything was scavenged, that it would actually bring the material or the cost of making the thing down, so that if the entire thing to be recycled was a cheaper way of doing things, it's morally good, it's cheaper. You look at the producers and say, there's no way you can say no to this. It's cheaper. It's a cheaper option. It's morally good. You have to do it. Like, it's just a better option. And we did that with Peter and the Starcatcher. It's not super sustainable. There are a lot of problems with it, but it was a feeler out. Disney was trying to have us feel out whether that was a business model that was viable. And we made that set, and then it moved to Broadway again. And the next year, we got the Tony for the best set design. So within the first 2 years of our company, we had Tony nomination and a Tony for best set design, which our company, what I was doing with my small group was integral to the look of that. And then it's just kind of been like, then I was kind of a small business owner, right? I've been working on Broadway for now 11 years. Well, before that, but the company's been open for 11 years, and we keep doing it every year consistently. Of the shows that are nominated for best musical and best plays for set design, we usually have, out of 11 of them, we'll have work in about 6 or 7 of them. So we're definitely, it's going strong and it's going great, and you learn every day how to get better. I was saying to this group that for me, it's always a forward momentum. There's a situation where at the conclusion of every job, you're like, that went well, or sometimes it went horribly, right? But you kind of look at it and you review and you say, it wasn't perfect though, was it? Let's be honest with yourself, Grady. It wasn't perfect. I think that we could do this a little. I think the next time I do this, I'll solve that problem. Let's do it again. Let's try it again. And, it's been 11 years in the company and 10 years prior to that. I'm still going, right? Like, I haven't quite gotten to that point where I'm like, dude, I'm nailing this every time, right? You have to, you create your own scenario to keep your momentum going, and you keep it interesting for yourself.
Thank you, Grady.
And that's my journey.
That's your journey. Have to cut you off here a little bit.
Yeah, that's
okay,
good.
so Antje, you're up next.
Oh, no, I think you're muted.
You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. let me start over. I'm a set designer, and I grew up in Germany, and came to the States to study set design at Boston University. I sort of stumbled into it, I have to say. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, except that it had something to do with art and potentially storytelling and sociology. You know, there were multiple interests, and I was leaning more towards just going to college in general. And then somehow my application landed with the School for the Arts and the theater department in particular, and the faculty there decided that I would make a good set designer. And so I was kind of flattered into taking the challenge, and it did suit me. And they remained very supportive of me throughout my 4 years. And I ended up with a full scholarship, and then a grant to get started in New York. So I came out of school in the mid-90s, feeling very strong and very excited to go to New York. And I started, the first job that I took was with a sort of slightly frenzied set designer who was working in regional theaters. And I realized, I think probably on my very first day, that I was suddenly a small fish in a very large pond. And it was challenging, and what I was lacking was practice, and I just hadn't really cranked out, you know, set after set, and done a lot of drafting and model making, and I think when for this particular designer, he was dependent on assistants to work very fast, and that was not me, and so he let me know that how displeased he was. He lowered my wage from, I think it was $10 then, to $9. Which was pretty paltry even then. And I think I just sort of stuck with it, sort of going on stress and adrenaline. And it was probably a couple of weeks until I finally did something that he approved of. And I could tell he liked what I was drawing. And I was so relieved that I just crashed, and for the rest of the day couldn't keep my eyes open. And so that was my first job in New York. And I can't quite decide if that was a horrible way to start, or if I'm glad in the end, because I learned some things. I definitely came away from it feeling that everything after was so much easier and so much more welcoming. And I persevered, and I learned some things, and met people, and got better, and sort of stuck it out. And I think, I don't know, I think that's an important thing to hold on to, that even if you don't always feel confident, you know, it's good to be tenacious and to stick to your guns if you are where you want to be, even though it's not easy yet. So I moved on, and even though this designer did not like working with me, he liked me well enough as a person, and so he recommended me to other designers. And so I ended up spending, I think, the better part of 10 years assisting set designers, theatrical set designers in New York. And I sort of loved it. I have to say, I learned so much just in terms of how they structured their days, and how they structured their creative efforts, and how they would talk to directors, and the techniques they employed, and just everything, just how to sort of be a disciplined artist and create work and present it, you know, to a director and to a producer and so on. And also I have to say, it was a nice way to get started in New York, because it was steady, and I was getting paid for my time at a better and better rate as I was going on, and joining the union eventually, and then working on Broadway, and working as an associate. And so I was given more leeway, more responsibility, and I sort of continued to learn until I got to a point finally where I wanted more. And I think I wanted credit for what I was doing, and I wanted to pursue my own ideas and be the designer, and not just the person behind the scenes facilitating, you know, the set. And I think one of the things I learned as well is that I think going into it as an assistant, I always thought that it would lead to being a designer, that there was a logical trajectory. And what I realized is that isn't really the case, that were two separate careers for me initially, that I could work as an assistant and I could pursue my own, at the time, off Broadway shows, which is what I did for a few years. And I think my first sort of breakthrough or success as a designer finally was also kind of accidental, because I had designed a set for friends of mine who were actors, and it was a sort of rolling group of people who would rehearse for a year, and people would come and go, and then coming closer to moving into the theater, they would pick each other's roles, and so it was sort of this ongoing nebulous endeavor that it was an adaptation of the Greeks, which was in and of itself about 7 hours long, and I was greatly fatigued just reading it, but they were friends of mine. And so we came up with this scheme of setting it in a sort of bombed out apocalyptic landscape that looked something like, I guess, Iraq during the Gulf War. And as was the case with productions like this, not a lot of people showed up, and I was not super enthusiastic about it, but it did get noticed by the artistic director of the theater that we were renting, and he was about to produce a show called 9 Parts of Desire, and which he envisioned would look something like the set that we'd created for the Greeks. And so he thought he'd hired a very cool director and a designer who I had assisted for some time, and then presented his idea to them and said, I think you should talk to Antje. I think we could use her set potentially, or maybe adjust it, and you can work on this together. And so the director and the designer said, no way are we doing that, but perhaps she can have a go at it. And so I met with the director, and during our first meeting, she said, we're not using your set from another show. We're going to do this from scratch. And which was, to be expected, and I thought the right thing to do. And so I developed a set with her that was in line with where she was going, and not so much in line with what the artistic director wanted. And so she eventually ended up leaving the project, but encouraged me to stick around with it. And I have to say, at this point, I'd read the play and I was just mesmerized by it. I thought it just moved me, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. It just energized me and inspired me. And so I met the second director, Joanna Settle, who I ended up working with for many of productions of this particular play. And it was sort of our, after it ran for a long extension at Manhattan Ensemble Theater, it ended up going to a bunch of different regional theaters. And it was a way for us to be out there and meet artistic directors at, Berkeley Rep we went to, and the Geffen Playhouse in LA, and a theater in Chicago, and Arena Stage. So it was like all the amazing big regional theaters that I sort of yearned to work in. And we were traveling with a play that we felt tremendously proud of. And so that was, I think, kind of my calling card, as a set designer in theater. And so then I ended up doing that for some time, also mixing it up a little bit with assisting. And eventually, after a few years, I sort of felt like I wasn't making enough money. I wasn't getting enough work to really sustain myself in a way that I wanted to. It was too stressful. I was constantly worried about paying rent and bills and so on, and frustrated also by the fact that the work wasn't exciting enough to warrant that kind of sacrifice over going forward. And so I brainstormed with friends about what else I might do, and I think that led to making a really distinct effort to move into film and TV. And that was a few years ago now. So I want to say it was not quite yet at the cusp of it sort of exploding in New York City. And it also was complicated by the fact that I needed to then also shift from learning to draw digitally by CAD when I had sort of spent the most of my career doing everything by hand. And so I had to kind of relearn and also learn sort of different standards in the TV realm. And but eventually I met enough people and went from being a day player to getting hired on other projects. And I have to say it suits me well and I enjoy it. And I've like, similar to my experience early on as a theatrical set designer, it takes time but you get better as you do it. And if you have some sort of aptitude and interest. And so I feel like now I'm at a point where there's tons of work and it's a great place to be. It's very supportive. And I do less and less theater, but I think now that I'm not so freaked out about money, I would happily, take on a theater project here and there as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Alejandro, you're next.
Thank you. My very beginnings in theater, I grew up, I was born in Colombia and grew up traveling around and eventually moved to Houston for high school. And that's sort of when I started getting involved in theater, not so much for my own interest, but because it's just where I started meeting people from. It's sort of where my social circle started forming. When I graduated, I decided not to work in theater or study theater. And instead, I actually moved to New York, where I live now, for a different program at NYU, not a theater program. But very quickly, I was just like swinging a wrench, designing shows, getting to know some people. And I realized that maybe I did actually want to pursue it more, pursue design specifically a little bit more. So I transferred to the University of Cincinnati, which is a conservatory program specifically for lighting design. And while, a conservatory program, very intense, a lot of production work. Over the summers, I was also working at Williamstown Theater Festival. I was there 4 summers overall, which in Williamstown terms is a pretty long time. First as an intern and then moving up into a couple of different staff positions. And I definitely, Grady mentioned this earlier, it was definitely like a really good place to meet people. I really professionally only assisted a couple of people, and both of them I met at Williamstown. But I also think I picked up some really, what I'm now realizing were really bad work habits that I'm really trying to sort of break from nowadays, as I value my time and my energy more. So I was spending all this time, really intense summers at Williamstown, really intense production time in Cincinnati. And when I finally graduated, I came to the city and just kept on assisting the people that I was working with. I worked a lot with Ben Stanton for a while, doing sort of off-Broadway, assisting him on off-Broadway plays. I also started working with Clifton Taylor, who does a lot of dance. And I started working with him internationally. So I was traveling to Chile to sort of assist, but it was also helping manage the crew. It really started forming me in a little bit more of project management thinking, sort of thinking about in the dance world, in the event world, the lighting designer oftentimes is holding a lot of the information, is really working with the stage manager or production manager. So I started sort of branching out of just like the design of the piece to also helping facilitate. And while I was assisting, what I was doing I was trying to assist as much as possible. And I was programming a lot at the new school specifically. I probably worked almost 5 years there programming their shows and working as an electrician, which was all things that I was sort of taught not to do. Everyone was like, oh, if you want to be a designer, just be around designers, get to know the theaters, get to know, something that people always said to me was don't swing a wrench in a theater that you want to work at. But I actually really disagree with that. I think that being an electrician has made me a better designer. And a lot of the electrics work that I was doing was for commercial events. I was working a lot for Fashion Week, which pays a ton of money and is a really stressful time. But you really sort of learn this whole other side of production that our theater background doesn't really acknowledge very much. So that after a few years of really working with this company that did fashion shows, I transitioned into their design staff. And I've been doing a lot of commercial events since then. I do both events here in the city, Fashion Week, fashion shows, product launches, TV premieres, things like that. And I also started working on some other of like I do a lot of site lighting for music festivals, which I really enjoy because it branches sort of the business side of commercial events, where you really are a lot more involved in sort of a project management and producing side of an event, but then doing it for a music festival where 50 to 100,000 people are going to be walking through these environments, and you're like trying to create a safe environment that they can make their way back to their campsites, that they can really sort of go through these campsites and entryways and really be transformed into a different space, which to me is really theatrical. And that has sort of started me pursuing some more work that is a little bit outside of lighting design, outside of like traditional theatrical design, but really about sort of creating these experiences for people. So since then, I now also do I've been designing some escape rooms recently and some immersive games where we're really blending this idea of like going to the theater, but allowing guests to participate. With the pandemic, it's been really interesting to also give people a different relationship to the theater. It's changing now. We're here in New York, we're opening theaters again. There's no social distancing, houses are open. But for a while we were working on projects that was really about like giving a small group of people access to a theater, and maybe people who don't normally have access to theater, to be able to experience and play and just have fun inside of these theatrical spaces. So I've really been shifting sort of away from, I still do a lot of dance work, a lot of theater work, but I'm really excited to sort of think about what other forms of entertainment are being developed right now, what other industries really work in parallel ways to how we learn in theater. But definitely, especially living in a city like New York, where the market is extremely competitive, being able to understand that there's so many industries that pay way more money and respect your time way more for very similar, if not the same work, has been really valuable. Because I again, some of these things that I was learning at college and at Williamstown is this idea that like, oh, like to become a designer, you have to like, assist, get to know people, hang out with other assistants and associates, really get to know everyone on the team and just keep on going. And eventually you're going to get that lucky break that that's going to start off your career. And that was not really the case for me. I think it really sort of, I was taught to think about this industry as tracks, as like, oh, if you want to work in dance, you just have to like focus on dance work until you success, or if you work in theater or Broadway or whatever. But I've really understood, have been realizing over the past few years that actually for me, a broader reach of different industries, different styles of work is actually more beneficial for me. It's like helpful to like navigate from different kinds of stress and move through different things. So now I'm like really actively questioning how I'm coming back to work, because I want to be doing work that is fulfilling to me, enriching to my design aesthetic, and creating something interesting out there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Josh, you're up next.
Well, hi, I'm a costume designer. I suppose my journey began when I was about 15 or 16 in high school, I was super interested in the costumes for, our school musical. So I had to be a part of it. And I already always had design sensibilities. I grew up performing a lot. I was like in commercials and that nature when I was a kid, but I knew that wasn't where I wanted my, life to take me necessarily. So I started in high school working on the plays. And then from there, I went on to study costume design at the University of Evansville, which was really exciting. It was a small liberal arts program, but I met a lot of really incredible people, and I still get to work with some of my classmates. It's really exciting. I come across them in the wild. And between my junior and senior year, I also had the opportunity to go to Williamstown as an intern my first summer, and it was so transformative to be taking all of the skills and the knowledge I had been receiving at school and putting it to work and working with all of these incredible designers that I had heard about and idolized for my whole childhood. And it was so transformative, and I felt like it was like such an incredible breakthrough to be there to finally kind of understand like how you get from point A to point B. And there are skills that I learned at Williamstown that I still use every day to this day. And there are little tricks and tips that I got while I was there that I still think about. And I had the opportunity to work with really incredible, nurturing individuals, which I always try and internalize, because there are so many opportunities and experiences that you have that are maybe not the best, or maybe you aren't working with the warmest or kindest or most nurturing people. But I have found that if I come in with that energy, a lot of people will try and keep that energy with me, which has been really transformative. And as I have become a designer myself, I bring that in with me to work every day. And I found that as a leader, that really trickles down, which has been really empowering. So after Williamstown, I finished my senior year of high school, and I had the opportunity to design some shows there, and applied to a bunch of different grad schools. But I am a costume designer that's never really been super adept at the sketching part of things, and it was always kind of drilled into me that that was a skill that I had to have to be a designer, that I wouldn't have a career, wouldn't have the opportunities that my other classmates had. So with that in mind, and I moved to New York, and I had $300 in my checking account, and I decided to just see what happened next. And I got a job waiting tables, and I started like trying to find little gigs assisting here and there. I was an assistant for school plays at some of Manhattan's private schools, and got to get my feet wet that way. And then I had the opportunity to work with the incredible David Zinn, who has always been a very kind and warm mentor to me. And I learned so much from him. And then when I started out designing, I always had this idea and this passion for designing clothes for television. I was fascinated by the psychology that went into the choices for contemporary television. And so I, on a whim, had the opportunity to be a PA for what was supposed to be for 3 days on the TV show The Good Wife, and for the incredible Dan Lawson, the costume designer there. And so I took the job, and I started, and I was supposed to be there for 3 days, and I didn't leave Dan's side for 9 months. And I always feel like that was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, to work with an entire team that went out of their way to be warm and nurturing and enrich my experience. Even though I was just a PA, they wanted me to have an understanding for the path ahead that I could take. And I will always be grateful to them and try and impart that on the teams that I get to work with, because, I feel like we're always in the presence of the next generation. And I try to internalize that, because so it was invaluable to me. I wouldn't have the career or the life that I have now without that experience. And from there, I was a costume PA. It was 12 hours a day, driving the shoppers around, doing returns, tidying up the office, getting there before everyone, being there to lock up at the end of the day. I loved every second of it. I relished it. I loved waking up in the morning and returning clothes to Saks. It was just like the most exciting thing I thought I would ever get to do. And from there, I had the opportunity to start assisting, and then worked as a costume design assistant for TV, just back to back for about 7 years. I worked 50 weeks a year, and it was an exciting time. But I that because I had this idea that you have to do the backbreaking work and pay, and you have to quote unquote pay your dues in a way that takes something from you. And I know now that was not necessarily the correct, because the truth is I think that everyone's path is a little different and everyone's journey is a little different. And I set out thinking I would have a career as a assistant costume designer, and I never thought that I would be a costume designer. And then the opportunity came to me, and I felt like I really stepped into my power. I had the opportunity to design some episodes of Orange is the New Black, and from there, everything changed. I had a different understanding of where my career and my life was going to go. And from there, I had the opportunity to work with an incredible showrunner producer named Dina Sud, who was doing a TV show for Netflix called 7 Seconds. And that was my first design job that I had done, myself. And it was really empowering, and I got to work with some really incredible actors. And while no one watched the show, I still value it as one of my favorite experiences ever. And from there, I just started hustling and getting other opportunities, and I designed a couple of other television series. And this year I began designing features as well, which is a bit of a different animal, but it's always very exciting. And I have into features because of how much time you to spend think about the individual details, about the individual touches and how those will see because it's it's interesting. I feel like my journey is just that's my journey until today, I suppose.
Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate that. And next up, Twi, you're about to go. So
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Twi. I'm a sound designer. My story is going to be a lot shorter because I've only been working for 3 years. So I'm still fairly new to what I do. I'm from Baltimore, went to college at Howard University, which is an HBCU. A lot of people know Howard for like the famous actors that they produce, but they also have a technical theater program, which is what I was in. I failed out of school, literally failed my lighting class, my scenic class, and a few other classes. But before I failed out, I was forced down this like costume design path that I hated and was not good at. Howard didn't have any like sound professors, and they still don't, unfortunately. So it wasn't until I left school and moved to New York in 2018 that I started doing sound for the first time. My first job up here was at a dance company called New York Live Arts. For better or for worse, it was my first job, but it allowed me to learn the basics of everything for the first time, like how to stand on a ladder to hang a speaker. And what does a microphone do? What do these buttons on the sound console do? So I was grateful for that experience. After I left there, I worked as like a stagehand in A1 and A2 for a lot of small theaters. And I literally sent my resume out to every theater I ever wanted to work for, every like older sound designer I ever wanted to meet. And only like one or two people actually responded to me, and have been a mentor to me ever since then. Build my resume somehow. Got my first Broadway credit this year, and that came about through me spending a year trying to meet the director, DMing him on Instagram many times just because I was following his work and really wanted to meet him. And when theater shut down and everything went virtual, sound designers were very fortunate to maintain a lot of our work. So that director hired me to do all of his like radio plays during the COVID year, and I butchered all of them. If anyone ever gets to meet him and wants to ask about me, he will tell you that I did a horrible job, but we bonded so much that when he got his call about directing something on Broadway, he called me to design his show. And I think that's like a good example of networking, about like networking with people beside you, people who haven't necessarily made it yet, because when they do make it, they might take you along with them. And during COVID, I got into a lot of professional television work, doing like dialogue and sound effects editing for Stars shows, NBC shows. And by the middle of next year, I will be leaving New York permanently to move to the Bay Area to work for a company called Skywalker Sound. They do all the sound for every like Marvel, Disney, and Pixar film and TV show. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I told you it was going to be short. I have no work experience.
Well, thank you very much, Twi. And Mitchell, it's up to you to bring us home now.
Hey everyone, I'm Mitchell. I'm a costume designer. My experience mirrors a lot of what we've heard today. I was very interested in theater in high school. I was in a very supportive high school that really gave us a chance to experience all kinds of arts. They really pushed the theater department, not just its performances, but also its, set design, costume design, lighting design. So we really got a sense of what that could be. And from that moment, I was pretty hooked. I knew I loved the show, but I was much more interested in the business of the show. So I decided to go to school. I went to the University of Connecticut, where I studied costume design and puppetry. I was really fascinated by the idea of what sort of characters I could create if I wasn't limited to a human body. I have always just been really tenacious about trying to seize opportunity whenever I felt like it was close. And we had a costume designer called Gary Jones come to do a lecture at my university. And I just went up to him afterward and I asked him, like, how does somebody like me get to where somebody like you is? And so I give everyone in this chat credit because you're here doing the same thing. You're trying to learn about how we got here. So you're already doing something right. I was very lucky that he, sort of laughed at my tenacity, but also gave me a chance. And he told me he had a movie coming up, and if I was somehow able to get myself there, he would hire me. So I had never been anywhere without friends or family before, but suddenly I was on a plane out to New Mexico to do a movie with this designer that I had met. And it ended up being an incredible experience that led to me being this man's intern, costume coordinator, PA, costume shopper, assistant designer, associate designer. And then the creative networking that happened along the way sort of blew up my connections, which is another thing that so many of us have talked about tonight. I always tell people that it's a little bit like creative dating. Like, you've got to find the people that make you feel good. So bark up the right tree. If you're not making progress in a certain direction, that's totally fine. Trust your life and try to find places that help you grow, that keep you learning about crafts that you're interested in. As Twi mentioned, like, someone might put you in a program that doesn't really suit you, but then look at how she's blown up because she was put in the right spot, So I think if you can take anything from what we've talked about today, it's start your networking now. Understand that it's going to take a little while. It's not something that happens overnight, and there's not a ton of instant success in our business, but there is a lot of success for people who are hardworking and dedicated. So if you can just do a little bit of that along the way, you probably will end up where you want to be.
Okay, thank you so much, Mitchell. Liz, do we have any questions yet? Because if not, I've got a few more I can bring in here.
Well, I have none in the chat, but I do invite people that are here to put them in the chat. This will eventually be on our website for people to view this wonderful presentation you guys have done. And I did have one question that would be nice for posterity. And then Ray, you can go back to your questions. I had a quick question. Joshua, you mentioned the skills you use every day that you learned early on. I was wondering if you might tell some of our aspiring designers a little about what those skills are that you learned, because it'll help them know what they should learn. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for the question. Some of them are literally silly. It's like kind of like the way that we, format packing returns. I learned at Williamstown. And I learned how to properly swatch at Williamstown. I learned about, what information needed to be on the tag, and I think I thought a lot about color theory when I was at Williamstown, and I learned about dyeing techniques when I was at Williamstown, which are also skills that I just think about whenever I'm choosing colors and compositions as well. But it was a lot of like the literally remedial things. I learned what kind of scissors to never use on fabric and vice versa.
Wonderful. If there's anybody out there that would like to put anything in the chat, great. Otherwise, back to you for now, Ray.
Well, one of the questions that people always ask, and some of my students ask too, are there any jobs you regret taking, and how do you avoid those kind of situations? Anybody want to jump in here and talk about something they regretted doing as a job? Yes, Antje?
I would say that I had taken one job designing a set for a theater that I was really excited about, for the Goodman Theater, and it was working with a director that I didn't know, and we somehow did not manage to communicate with each other well, and had misunderstandings along the way, and I think we never quite got to a point where our ideas and our language meshed, and I found myself for the first time ever in my design career feeling sort of emptied out after like a few go rounds of presenting ideas to her and discussing them and so on. And I realized that it's really most of 95% of the time, or let's say 99% of the times, the process of designing is one of is constructive, and one conversation leads to the next, and you're creating something into existence. And with her, it was sort of the exact opposite, that I felt sort of punished by the experience of it all. And also for the very first time ever in my career, I quit. And I have to say it was one of my worst experiences. And I slightly I regret that that I stuck it out for as long as I did, because it was so phenomenally stressful. And I think what I derived at, I might have said to her even earlier, I might have just said, listen, we're a very bad match here, and you're better served with somebody else. And that would have been the end of it. And instead we sort of slogged it out for a few more weeks after. And I think it's been said before, I think when you're working in a creative field, it's very important that you work with people who you respect and admire and understand. And if you don't have that, then it becomes incredibly difficult. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That was great. Anybody else have a, yes, Grady?
I feel like I've had many experiences that I wouldn't say I regret them. I think it's kind of a frame of mind, right? Like, you do them, and at the end, you kind of evaluate whether it was good or whether it was bad. And there have been many, many times where at the end of a thing, I can say, well, I know that I can check that one off my list as something that I never will do again. right? And so it's less of a regret, because you can chalk it up as an experience to hone, right? So it's like, now I know what not to do. But like without that experience, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't know that, you know? So I'm thankful for the experience, but I'm never going to let that happen again.
Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about something that they've also learned from a toxic or bad environment? Mitchell.
I really agree with Grady, because I feel like as designers, it's sort of a vague job description where you get to decide, do you only want to work in New York City? Do you want to work throughout regional theaters in the United States? Do you want to be an international designer? So do you want to be a period designer? Do you want to be contemporary? There's so many things that just because you've made it to the level of a designer, there's still so much figuring out that you have to do once you've become that designer. So I think it's worth taking some of the risks that could lead to what you would describe as a regret, in order to be a better designer and understand how to succeed as the opportunities come towards you. So I don't know that I regret any of my choices. I've certainly learned a lot from some of them. I learned how to quit a job. I learned how to do that professionally, but I wouldn't have had that experience if I never put myself in a position where that was a possibility.
Thank you. Liz, back to you.
Yeah, and you guys can continue, but Stefan has a question for any of you who would like to weigh in on this. What is a dream production that you would love to work on, and why? Any takers? Something you think about at night? Oh, I wish I could do this. I want to do Sweeney Todd again.
I'll go. For me, it's more about the people involved on the project. I think when I was younger, I used to think it was more about the material, or you know, some cast member that would really light me up. But as I've grown confident in my profession, I think it has so much more to do with the energy that surrounds the project than the project itself, because it could be my dream. You know, I could be doing cabaret on Broadway, but if it's with a bunch of horrible people who don't align with my creativity, then it's never going to be the project of my dreams. So I think it's way more about the energies that I can align with.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you have another one?
Yes. Someone wants to know if you feel as if designers get enough credit for their work compared to actors. Interesting question. Alejandro has a good answer for that.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of feelings about this, but not really in relation to actors, more in general. I really think, you know, I think our job is so special to like look at the text, to look at the team, to look at the people coming together to create a project and like imagine a world, whether it's realistic or imaginative. You know, we really have to like craft a world. And I think over the past couple of years, there's been so much talk about how this industry, these industries, because I think it is happening both in film and TV and in theater, need to change. And I'm really struck by the power that designers have. Like, we are powerful people, but in these industries, the places where we actually have access to power are very limited. So I actually think that I wish designers were like really taking it apart of like programming, curatorial teams, theatrical boards, all these places where we can like use our dreaming of like how we can imagine better ways of doing things, like using all of our creative problem solving to actually address the industry that we live in. And just even how the hierarchy of our unions in the theater world operate. Like, we really need to change how, like, where we are given a chance to speak up. Because I do think that, you know, there's like one thing of like, what is the most visible parts of a show, but I really think that the designers are really powerful people. I think there's a lot of like dreaming and imagination that are a part of this job. And I think that where we are in the world right now, in our industry and in the world in general, like what we need is creative problem solving. So I definitely think that we need more designers. And I definitely think that we need to be able to be designing, to like bringing our energy to projects, but also to the world in general right now.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer, talk about that question or discuss where designers should be going in this world as we're changing things? Yes, Antje?
Actually, I remember a lighting designer once saying to me that he thought the best lighting design was invisible of sorts, or not self-conscious anyways, you know, not something that you could point out or notice. And I think there's some truth to that. And in line with that, I would say some of the thrill of working in a creative industry like theater in particular, and also in film, is that I think you're part of something bigger. And it's very tricky going into it expecting some kind of recognition or fame, let's say, akin to what a movie star might experience. I think if you're interested in collaborating and experiencing something coming together and being a part of that and being in the midst of it, I think that's much more likely and I think much more satisfying, I think.
Anyone else on that topic? Ray, you had said you had some questions initially that maybe you wanted answered if we had time.
Yeah, one of the questions I'd like to ask, and that is that in our society, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, privilege and bias and all of that. And I'm just wondering if any of you have experienced any of that and how you overcame it, or, you know, how you think the industry can change to help be more inclusive. Don't all answer at once.
I think I think it starts with leadership. I think it starts with acknowledging the disparities that are ever present in our industry. I think it really does come from the top down. Like if you're in a position where you're hiring a team, I think that you need to do everything you can to make sure that you are giving opportunities to everybody that you can. You are trying to educate folks that you can, participating in programs like this, doing your own work and your own education to try to understand others' perspectives. So I feel like if any of us in any sort of a position to create a team are doing that work, that is probably the most important thing that we can do, rather than put a dress on an actress or a light on a stage or a door on a stage. I think that's actually the kind of life-changing work that we should be just as focused on.
Grady?
I totally agree with that. I also feel like, you know, I've been doing a lot of reflection about my privilege as a straight white male doing what I'm doing, and also asking kind of what can I do, like what can I do, and you know, I'm one of the things that I have kind of landed on, and I think that this community is really great, and is a start to this. What we've heard tonight is that collaboration, relationships, all of these things are integral to our being successful in our careers. And so for me, I need to give an opportunity when people apply to my studio. I don't see very many BIPOC people. I don't see those people in our industry. And because it's so focused on collaborations and who you know and doing all that kind of stuff, the onus becomes on us to create the opportunity for those people to make collaborations, to meet people, and to be able to create friendships and grow and be in the room with the people who are already here. And so I, you know, I feel like I can do that, you know, and we're trying at my shop to really make a concerted effort to create opportunities in a younger generation so that this will change.
Thank you.
That's what I got.
I also just want to add, I mean, I think this is so complex because I think it's a lot of different layered problems that have led to lack of opportunities for certain people. I like to speaking in privilege. I think it's really important when folks have privilege, like when folks have access to stability, to jobs, to opportunities, to like just being popularly hired. Like, I think there's a lot of different forms that privilege actually takes place in people's lives. And I think it's really important to find the ways that we can actually turn that around, to share that privilege and bring other people into spaces that we have been given access to. And I think that part of that is like, the places where people tend to get hired in this industry, you know, and a lot of it here in New York specifically, a lot of these jobs occur from networks. You know, Williamstown is a huge network that like still gives a ton of people work. Yale, NYU, what school you go to also creates all these different networks. And I think it's important to sort of recognize why some people have access to those networks and why people don't. And if you have access to those networks, like really getting to know who else is in the community, getting to know who's entering this industry, which is why I think this mentorship program is so good, is to like really get a sense from different paths of who is coming into this industry and being able to show them and open up the doors that otherwise were for so long kept to people from smaller networks. And I think it's important to recognize that like that there are actually a ton of people that are working, but there's actually in some of these markets there are very few jobs. You know, in theater it's very common here. Again, I'm speaking mostly from the New York experience. It's so common to see people taking 2 or 3 different shows at the same time because rates are bad, because you never know when you're going to get hired again, because all these different things. And that is also shutting people out of jobs. You know, so I think that really creating a greater sense of community, like really reaching out to other people in the industry, reaching out to people entering the industry, and just building those communities and getting those people to work with you, to work with other people, recommending people. There's just so many ways that we can advance. What am I trying to say? There's so many ways that we can like clear the path for people based on experiences that we have had, you know, and I feel this, you know, with a lot of the places that I've been able to, both from like where my path into the theater world brought me in, but also like breaking away from that and seeing all these other industries that are so often not seen as like artistically fulfilling or good work, but it's you know, we sharing this knowledge, sharing our experiences, sharing our opinions is so important to let people know what else is out there. And I think that these community building spaces become really important for that sort of work.
Thank you, Alejandro. So to end up here, what I'd like to do is ask each of you in turn again to tell the one thing, the one skill, the one thing that you would be looking for if someone were coming to you to be your assistant, or that you feel is vital, that you would need to see in that person, aside from a wonderful, nurturing, warm personality and being pleasant. So we'll start from the beginning again, just a very short thing. What are you going to be looking for? The one skill that you really feel that someone needs. So Grady, you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I mean, we've often talked about this at our shop, and I've talked about it with other Broadway prop coordinators. One guy in particular, Buse Bickley, has always said that the thing that you most need, more than skill, more than know-how or anything, is to be a pleasurable person to be around, right? And you can learn the skill. You'll learn the skill, and you'll have the experience, and you'll grow. But if no one wants to be around you, it's you won't get the jobs.
Okay,
That's what I got.
thank you. Antje?
I completely agree with Grady. I was going to say something similar, but I'll say something practical instead. Otherwise, I would say for somebody who's sort of come up in my career at a time when we were working with pencils, I think if I was hiring somebody, I would want them to assist me with new technology, with SketchUp, with Rhino, with one of those 3D modeling programs. I would totally appreciate an associate or assistant who I could learn from, quite honestly, in turn, and maybe somebody I could collaborate with on that front.
Thank you. Alejandro?
I also want to uplift learning. I think I think life is constantly about learning and about sort of placing yourself where you like understanding where you are in each room that you're in, whether it's a job or just a life experience. So I really appreciate folks who are not nervous about asking questions, not nervous about like seeing the situation that they're in as an opportunity to learn something new, and also to share something with the people that they're with, so that, so that it's like I can't remember the word. It's like a dual relationship of learning, where you're both teaching and receiving. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Josh?
I never undervalue passion and an openness to new ideas and new ways of working are invaluable to me personally.
Thank you. Twi?
Someone who knows how to be present in the moment, like something I'm still growing out of, is not being on my phone or on social media when I'm in tech. And I think as a young designer, that's something very important.
Thank you. Mitchell?
For me, it would be follow through, and that's at all levels on my team, from PA to assistant designer. A lot gets thrown at us, and it can be easy to let something slip through. So just someone who's able to follow through, whether it's making sure the printer has ink or making sure that the actress is dressed, like follow through matters to me.
Great, thank you. Jane, you haven't said anything, but you're here now. I'm wondering if you'd like to make a little closing comment and join us.
She told me she had just gotten on the plane, so maybe she can't really talk for some reason, but hi, Jane. We hope you're well. I was reading her.
Okay.
She's on her way to Kennedy. Oh, there she is. What?
Can you hear me?
A little bit, Jane. Yes.
Well, I kind of have to whisper. I'm in the middle of a jet.
We hear you.
Thank you, everyone. What a nice panel. I'm so sorry. I'm on this flight from hell from London. We're in the middle of Stewart Airport right now. So I thought it was a great panel, and I love the discussion at the end, because that's what this whole thing is about. So keep it alive in your own lives, okay?
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.